Hello and welcome to Digital Wood Carving 101. My name is Laney Shaughnessy and I'm going to walk you through the first steps of designing and manufacturing or carving your first project. Now at this point, we're under the assumption that you have already watched the tutorial on installing your Vectric software, whether you have the Vectric vCarve desktop, Vectric vCarve Pro, or the Aspire software, that you've already got that installed on your computer, as well as your controller program, your Planet CNC TNG motion controller program. We are going to be using both of these programs in the creation and manufacturing of this carving. For this particular project, we're going to do a very simple getting started vCarve design, and you can make changes to the design to fit your needs. We're going to create the basic design, and then you can use your own creativity as far as the final result. So at this point we have our Vectric software open, and I am currently in the Vectric vCarve Pro. Now once again, it doesn't matter if you're using the Vectric vCarve desktop software, Pro, or the Vectric Aspire. This is going to be a tutorial that can be created in any of these three programs. So if you look at the screen, we've got the vCarve Pro open, and on the left side we have options, and you're going to have an option of creating a new file as well as opening an existing file. Now this being the first project that you're working on, most likely you don't have any existing files, and your recently opened files area will be blank. You will start to populate recently opened files as you begin to work on projects over here. Now, we're going to go ahead and create the new file. And within this new file is where we set up the job. Setting up the job basically entails telling the program what size material we're going to be carving. Now, this is going to be set up as a single-sided job for this project. And the project width along our x-axis, and so you understand what this means, the width of your screen from left to right represents the x-axis of your CNC machine. The height of your computer screen up and down represents the y-axis of your CNC machine. And the board length that I'm going to be working with is going to be a 15-inch long board, and it's going to be 7 1/4 inches wide. It's going to have a thickness of 3/4 of an inch. And now in the software is very intuitive. If you do not know a particular decimal for a fraction, you can very simply type in the fraction and hit the equal key on your keyboard, and it will convert it to that decimal for you. So our project is going to be 15 by 7 1/4 by 3/4 inches thick. We are going to, when we're at the machine, we're going to be touching off our router bit, setting our Z0 position off the top of the material that we're carving, so the material surface. Now, we also have an option for the Z0 positioning to touch off on the tabletop or a waste board if we have that under our project board, but this is for if you're doing something a little bit more advanced, like a 3D carving where all of the material is going to be milled away and you don't have any more top surface left with multiple tool changes. Then we would be touching off on the bottom of the board. And we'll get more into that as we get more and more involved. We're going to stick with the basics here, and we're going to work on the material surface for that touch off. Now the XY datum position is just a fancy way of saying our start position. Where are we going to zero out the X and Y axis on our machine and on our material that we're carving? You can work from any of the four corners of your board or from the center. And I'm going to recommend for your first project to work off the center as it's easiest to set up. So now that we've set up our material and things, we're going to click OK. And what we will see now is we will have our 15 by 7 1/4 inch board here, this white area. This is our representation of our material, our board. And the center of that board is our X and Y 0 position. And so this is where we're going to start from. What this means is when we clamp our board on our table, we will put in our V-bit, which we'll be using our 60-degree V-bit that came with your machine, and we would literally move that bit to where the point of the bit was right over the center of the board, and we will zero out the X and Y axis at this point. Now, when we clicked OK after setting up our job, it brought us right into our drawing tools. Now, during your initial orientation, we're going to be going over all of these tools individually and talking more about them. But for now, we're just going to go through and create this first project. So as we start off with our design, you're going to hear throughout your CNC journey and throughout this video terms that might be new to you if you're new to CNC. The one term is vectors. That's going to be a main term because we are actually drawing vectors. Whether we are drawing shapes or text, these objects that we create are considered vectors. Now, a vector is a scalable graphic that is basically defined by being a graphic whose shape is defined by a path, and the path is determined by points plotted along that path. Now, these points that are plotting along that path are referred to as nodes, and nodes are basically the fundamental building block in any vector. The line between two nodes, 2 points, that is your vector, and then whether it be a straight line, a Bezier curve, an arc, or any combination of these, the position of the nodes, whether they're smooth or not, and the strength of their control handles. You'll see the handles, we'll talk about that in a moment, that controls the curve or the line. These points will dictate the path of the shape. And so, therefore, we have a vector, and I'll draw a circle here. This will be our vector here. And if we were looking at the shape itself, if we went into the node editing of this, you would see these nodes, these points. And these points are determining the path that the lines, in this case the arcs in between each of the two nodes, to create our complete circle. Now, we have these indicators, these clear nodes here. They're not really nodes, they're kind of identifiers of center points, the center of that arc between any of the two node points that are out there. So just know that you're going to hear the word nodes, and these are the points between which a line, whether it's an arc, a line, or a curve, will follow. And then these points, these nodes going around, will ultimately create the path for those lines, arcs, and curves to create your shape. Now, let's go ahead and we're going to lay out our first sign. Now, as a first project, we're going to, whether this be maybe something like a shop sign for your shop or maybe a house sign for your home, it's going to be a good starter project. We're going to have some text and things in there. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a border, a nice little border around our design, and we're going to do that by drawing a rectangle. Now, we will be creating vectors, again, that term vectors, so we're going to be working in the Create Vectors menu. And so we're going to open up the Draw Rectangle tool here, and I'm going to, with the Vectric software, we have what's called Smart Snapping and Geometry Snapping, and we want those highlighted with the blue box. That means they're on. If they were not highlighted with that little box, surrounding box, that would mean they're off, but we want them on because what that does is that gives us snap points that we can work with. And therefore, I want to literally bring my mouse over to the corner of my board, and you'll see this little black point pop up. It's a snapping point. And that means I can hold down my left mouse button and I can literally drag my mouse across, and it's dragging this rectangle across from one corner to the opposite corner of the board, creating this vector rectangle all the way around. Now, you're going to see this camera moving around from place to place. So you're going to see it fly across your screen for a moment, and we're going to move it over here kind of out of the way. And now that we have this rectangle created, we can go ahead and close the rectangle tool. This brings us back to all of our drawing tools. Now another tool we're going to use in this project is going to be our offset tool. The offset tool basically allows us to create a similar shape, whether smaller or larger, if we're offsetting inward or outward from a previous shape that we've got selected. When a shape is selected, such as a rectangle, it'll either be a pink dotted line or a pink solid line. And because it is running around the perimeter of our board, it's hard to slightly hard to identify, but you can see those little pink dots there. We're going to offset this inward from itself a certain distance, and this is where my border is going to be carved. And I would like a 1-inch offset. So we're going to go for a distance of 1 inch. And you don't have to type in, 100, a solid number 1 will be fine. Or you can, if you want to get into the habit of the 100, that's fine as well, as either one apply. Now, I want this offset that's going to be created, I want it to have sharp corners just like my original rectangle, and I want to delete the original rectangle. Okay, and when it draws it, I want it to select the new shape that it's about to create. So I'm going to check off all 3 of these boxes. So when I click offset, you'll see now that it's created that new rectangle, offset 1 inch in from all 4 sides, and it's got the sharp corners, and my original shape has been deleted and removed because we no longer need it. We have our border here. Now, with this rectangle, if we wanted it to have radius corners, we can go back into that Draw Rectangle tool. If we wanted to have square corners, we would leave the corner type as square. Maybe we want a nice little radius corner, or an internal radius for a little decorative shape to give our sign a little bit of, style, so it doesn't look so just normal, ordinary. And so I'm going to use an internal radius here, and we're going to go with a radius of 3/4 of an inch. And with that, all I had to do was select on the internal radius and type in the radius that I wanted and just click apply. And it will create that radius look, and this is going to be a very nice looking border for our carving. Now, if that radius is too big for you, you want it smaller, you very simply you can come over here and you can change it to whatever you want and just reapply and make that adjustment as needed. The rectangle, when we reopened, and let's back up for a moment and kind of go back to where we were. When we determined that we wanted to change the corner type, we make sure that that rectangle is selected before we reopen that rectangle tool. So again, I'm going to put my radiuses in here, and I'm going to go with my 3/4 inch radius, and I'm just going to click apply to create that border. Alright, now the close button on any tool, when we open a tool, you'll find the close button at the bottom of the tool, and you want to close the tools as they're completed. Alright, so now for this, we're going to use our text tool. So again, it's in the Create Vectors menu, Draw Text tool. It's this first icon on the 3rd row. We're going to create some text, whether this be a house sign or whether it be a shop sign, whatever you would like it to be. And so with the text tool, we'll be writing out our text in this text box over here, and then any font that's installed on your computer you can use. The software will recognize all the fonts installed on your computer. Now, one of the more elegant fonts to work with when it comes to a script and a V carving is the Monotype Corsiva. If you do not have this font initially on your computer, we have provided that for you on your flash drive in the fonts folder. We provided that Monotype Corsiva for you because it's a really nice looking font. As far as block style fonts, you have your Times New Roman, your Tahoma, your Arial Black, whatever those may be for you. And so for this, I'm going to do a workshop sign. Let's assume it's a sign for our workshop to hang up, kind of our first carving and things. So I would like a block style text for this particular sign. So I'm going to just scroll down to the T's, and I'm going to use either a Tahoma or a Times New Roman font. Now I could very simply hit the shortcut by hitting the letter T on my keyboard, and it brings me right to the area that I want to work in my font box. And for this, I'm going to go with a Times New Roman, and I do want it to have a little bit of boldness to it. So for this, we're going to go with our shop sign, what it may be, and for me, it would be Spindle TV, and I'm going to hit the enter key to put another line here, and I'm going to call this my workshop. And I think I want everything in capital letters for this look, so I'm going to rewrite Spindle TV here and make it capital letters. Now, I want those two words centered over each other, so I have center selected. And now my text height, how tall I want those letters to be, is really going to determine also how wide everything is. And so I'm going to start off with a 1-inch tall text, and I'm going to click apply. And that's a pretty nice size text for this sign. But if we oversize our text height, let's say for instance I went with a 1.5-inch tall text and clicked apply, you'd see we're getting quite close to the border and things. So we're going to start off, I think a 1-inch tall text is going to be adequate for this, because I do want to do a little bit of decoration and curve and stuff. Now we're going to close the text tool. And just because the text tool is closed doesn't mean we can't work with this text. We can size it using our size tool under Transform Objects menu. Now, we have just created an object. We've actually got two. We've got our rectangle shape, which is an object, and our text object here as well. And so when we're transforming an object, we are moving it, sizing it, rotating it, maybe mirror or copying it, distorting it in some way, or aligning it to our material. And so we can use the size tool by opening it up, and we can create different sizes and things by using the menu. But also, if we double click on any of the objects, it brings up these boxes around the object, and it puts it in what's called a transform mode, meaning that we can do most all of these options without even opening the menus by using the points around. So my white points surrounding my text object here, these are my scale points. So I can scale up or down, make things bigger or smaller. My blue points on all four corners, these are rotate, so I can rotate my text if I want to. And my center point, and really anywhere on the vectors in the middle area here, is my move. So if I hold down my left mouse button, I can move this around. Now, to get back to where I was, as you see, as I was moving and rotating and stuff, I was able to get back to where I was. Well, that's the undo tool. I'm undoing the action that I just created. And the undo tool has a shortcut code, a keyboard shortcut of Control plus the Z key, holding the Control key down and hitting the letter Z. And that's what I was doing. That's why you weren't seeing the mouse go over physically to the menu. I was simply hitting Control Z to undo the action that I was trying to create. Now that I have my text and all, this text, we wrote it in two separate lines as a text block. And I would like this text to be a little higher on the Spindle TV up here a little bit, and the workshop down lower. So in order to work with these things, right now if I were to move things around, they kind of move together the way that it was created. So I would like to split these two lines up, and we do that by simply selecting our text, it'll be pink, and right clicking anywhere on the screen, and we can go down and break that text block into lines. So we'll do that. Now Spindle TV is one line and Workshop is one line. So I can go ahead and use my up arrow key on my keyboard, and I'm just bumping it up a little bit to kind of get it in place. As far as Workshop, I'm going to just click on it now, and I'm going to use my down arrow key and kind of move it around as well. I would like to have Workshop a little bit bigger, so I'm going to double click on it. It puts it in that transform mode. And if I grab this middle outside white box, if I hold my shift key down and I pull out, you'll notice that on both sides, the W and the P on both sides, it's scaling it evenly, keeping it centered in its position. So I want to do that. I want to pull it out just a little bit to make that a little bit bigger. And then the two top point, the top point and the lower point, either one, I can hold my shift key down and grab one of them and just make that text a little bit taller. And you see how it's kind of stretching that out. All right, so I like that. Now, mind you, you're going to be most likely creating a sign that has your name or your shop name, nickname, whatever it may be. So write the text as you want it written if you're following along with this tutorial, and following the steps, the same movement and scale and everything. The principles are all the same. You're just working with a different word or words than I am. All right, so for the Spindle TV, I would like this to have a little bit of an arc to it, a curve. And we have a fabulous tool over here under the Create Vectors menu next to the Draw Text tool. It's the third icon over, called the Edit, the Text Spacing, and Curve. And if I turn that tool on by clicking on it, you'll see these two green nodes pop up here on my Spindle TV that's selected. Meaning if I grab this top node, I can actually kind of pull up if I hold down my left mouse button and give it a little bit of a curve if I want. Now I can actually pull it down flat. That's as far as I can go. If I grab the lower green node, it would kind of pull it downward. And if I go back up with it, that's as far as it'll go as straight. So I want to give this a little bit of curve upward, just a nice little curve, give it a little bit of style, and go from there. All right, so this is our sign. We've got our nice border. We've got our text in there, and now we're ready to move over to create the toolpaths. The manufacturing side of the software is called CAM, Computer Aided Manufacturing, and this is where we'll find our toolpaths. And how do we get from the drawing side, our CAD side, Computer Aided Design, to the CAM side? Well, we have an icon up here at the top of our drawing tab. You'll find an icon that looks like a box with a blue arrow. It says switch to toolpath command. So if I click on that icon, it opens up, it closes the drawing side and brings over the manufacturing side, which is our CAM side of the software. And this is where we'll find all of our toolpath operations, like a profile toolpath, which we'll be using. Our V-carve toolpath, which we will be using. You have pocket cuts and drilling operations, and we'll talk more about these in upcoming videos and during your orientation. We're going to be utilizing these two toolpaths here, the profile toolpath and the V-carve toolpath. Now the V-carve toolpath is going to be for the text, and the profile toolpath is going to be for the border, because anytime we're following a line, whether we're carving inside the line, outside of the line, or on the line, we're following that path, and that's a profile toolpath. So we're going to start with the border. So we're going to open up that profile toolpath, and we're going to select our border, and the cut depth, the start depth is going to be the top of our board, which is 0. When we touch off that router bit, that's going to be Z0. So that's going to be our start depth. We're starting at the top of the board. And how deep are we cutting? Well, I'm going to be using a V-bit to create this border, and I would like to have that V-bit cut 1/8 of an inch deep. So we're going to type in 0.125. Now remember, if you don't know a decimal, you can type in the fraction and hit the equal key on your keyboard, and it will convert it to that decimal for you. Now, in my tools, this is going to be the first time that we open up our tool database on your end. And so when we hit select to select the tool, we're going to have a minimal list of tools, router bits in that list. And one of those tools is going to be under the VBit category. And under the VBit category, make sure that you are in the Imperial tools, because it does have metric tools as well down below. So we want to be in the Imperial tools, and you'll see a VBit 60 degree 0.25. That's the bit that came with your machine, your Whiteside 1541 router bit. So if we click on that, it'll select it. And now the default settings that came with the program that you just installed, your Vectric software, the speeds and feeds, your feed rate down here in the speed and feed category, your feed rate and your plunge rate need to be adjusted. You're going to see in your software a feed rate of 100. That needs to be reduced to 35. For the plunge rate, you most likely will see a plunge rate of 30. We're going to reduce that to 25. And those are the only two numbers we're going to change for this tool. And we're going to click the apply button to lock that in. Now we can click OK, and it will put that tool, that VBit 60 degree 1/4 inch VBit, it will put that in the tools section. Now I want that VBit to cut right on the line, so when it's machining the vectors, I want to cut on the line. And then we're going to go all the way to the bottom, and we're going to hit the calculate button, and it will calculate that toolpath. Now once it calculates the toolpath, you'll see now that you have what's called a toolpath preview window open. And the toolpath preview window is a three-dimensional view of your design and things and of your board. So this is kind of a representation of my board here. And we can look at it with, I've got it set to look like a cherry board, but we can set it to look like multiple different types of material, solid colors, whatever, may be. And I like the cherry look. And so if we look at these icons up here, if I click on this Z icon, that will bring my board kind of straight on, like we're looking at the top down. Now, the red lines and the blue lines you see are the toolpath preview, the profile toolpath that we just created, and over here on the right is your toolpath list, and here's our profile one we just created. Now the blue lines represents where that router's carving when we're making sawdust. The red line represents the path the router when it's up above the material, not carving, the path it's going to be moving before it comes down into the wood and starts carving. So the red lines are like the highway going from point to point or place to place, and the blue lines are where it's actually carving. So when we can see the red and blue lines in this preview window here, that is called a visible toolpath. And the reason why it's a visible toolpath is because in our toolpath list, that particular toolpath has a little check mark here. If I unchecked it, it would no longer be visible. We wouldn't be able to see those blue and red lines. So it's a visible toolpath. Now, also the toolpath itself is highlighted with a blue bar here, meaning it's a selected toolpath as well. This currently is the only toolpath that we have in our list. So either previewing the selected toolpath option or previewing the visible toolpath option would be a viable option to click to see this cut. So we're going to click on preview the visible toolpath, and we're going to let it carve out that profile. So there's going to be my profile cut there. Now we can go ahead and we're done previewing this. We need to create the other toolpath, the V-carve. So we're going to close. Remember, the close buttons are always at the bottom. We're going to close the toolpath preview window. And over here we have our 3D view. You can see our 3D view tab is front. That's what we're in. But we also have our 2D view. So if we click on that, that'll bring us back to our 2D view where we do our drawing. Now for the next toolpath, it's going to be the text. So when you're selecting more than one object, and I have two objects here, the spindle TV and the workshop, when you're selecting more than one object, you want to hold your shift key down on your keyboard to select multiple objects. If I don't hold my shift key down, then as I'm clicking, it's only going to select one or the other, whatever one I'm clicking on. But if I hold my shift key down, it'll allow me to select more than one object at a time. Now we're going to be using the V-carve toolpath. This is the first icon on the second row here. And for this, again, our start depth is going to be 0, the top of our board. Now, the V-carve toolpath is the only toolpath that will automatically calculate the depth of the cut based on the spacing between the lines of your design. So the wider the lines, the deeper the cut. The narrower the lines, the space, the shallower the cut. It calculates how deep it needs to cut for those two lines to meet at a V when it makes that carving. Now sometimes if your spacing is too wide, you may get a warning, and the software will warn you if it's going to cut through the material. Or you might not want it to cut a certain depth and want it to only go down so far in your material. Well, that's called a flat depth, because if we turn on the flat depth and we set a depth, what it does is it truncates that V and it cuts it off and creates a flat bottom to whatever depth that we specify. So if I came in here and said I wanted a flat depth of 1/4 of an inch, any part of the carving that would have carved past 1/4 of an inch deep would be flattened out at the bottom of that cut. I'm going to leave the flat depth off. I'm going to let the program automatically calculate the depth of cut for me because there's nothing, this is not going to be a very deep carving in itself. Now for the V-bit, we are going to go back and hit select, and we're going to go back to our V-bit category in our tool database, and we're going to select that same 60-degree 0.25 V-bit. And notice now that we've clicked apply and we locked in that speed and feed that it's locked in permanently. You've now reset that default, which is good. We'll have to go through and reset the defaults and things for your bits, and I will provide a sheet in your files that will give you a listing of the bits that came with the software and settings that they should be at. And mostly all of the settings are pretty much the same. There's a few changes in a couple of the bits. The real main changes are going to be in the feed rate and the plunge rate. So right now our V-bit is set correctly, so we'll just click OK to put it in our toolpath. And then with our two objects selected, we will come down and we will click calculate. And now again we can see that visible toolpath of the text that's going to get carved. Notice that it's highlighted and visible. Now we have two toolpaths in here. So when I'm previewing, which one do I preview? Do I preview the visible toolpath? Well, right now there's nothing visible because neither one of these are checked. Can I preview the selected toolpath? Yes, I can, because it's selected, it's highlighted with this blue bar. If I preview all the toolpaths, then it's going to recut the profile and the V-carve and show me everything that's in this list. So I'm going to, since it's selected, I'm going to preview the selected toolpath so we can see our carving. And there's our sign. So if I had to change the toolpath or depth or what have you, I can always, when I come back to re-preview it, I can reset the preview, and that'll take it and make it a blank board again, and then I can come in this case I want to see both of them now, so I'll preview all the toolpaths in my toolpath list here. So if I preview all, it'll show my profile cut and then my carving. It's going to show the toolpaths in the order that they're listed in the preview. So this is going to be our sign. And some of the neat things about the preview window is we can actually, again, we can change it to look like any type of material and stuff that we want to, just kind of give it a look and see, you know, how it would look in different materials for carving in pine. This has absolutely nothing to do with the type of material we're actually carving in. This is just for the preview purposes. We can actually get a little creative and we can add a little bit of color to the toolpath. So we can do a global fill, meaning whatever color that I choose here, everything, every toolpath that's carved will be filled with that color. Or we can actually assign individual colors to a toolpath. So right now my V-carve one is selected, and if I wanted that to be maroon, that would be maroon. And then if I select on that profile one, I could actually give it a color. Let's say I wanted it to be dark green, and we'd have, you can see those individual colors. Like if I was going to paint this sign, it kind of gives me a visual of what it would look like. So with our sign here, everything else good. Let's go ahead and turn off the color for now. When we're happy with the design and we're finished with it, we're now ready to save the toolpath. Now at any time we have not, which is bad. We should have done this in the beginning, so we'll do it now. We should take a moment and we need to save our actual design before, we lose it. If a battery goes dead on our computer or power goes out or something, we want to save it early and save often. And of course, I didn't save early. I'm saving at the end here, but we're going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and in our documents, we should create a folder called CNC Jobs. This is going to be the first time we're setting up our job folders and things for our projects and things. So in the documents, we're going to create a new folder. Here's a button for a new folder. And we're going to call this folder CNC Jobs. And this is where all of our jobs are going to go. And now we can open up that folder, and we're going to create a new folder inside of our CNC Jobs. And this is going to be called our, whatever you want to call it. In my case, I will call it Spindle TV Workshop Sign. And that's going to be my job folder where all my files are going to be stored for this job. So we'll open it up, and now down below we're going to save our design. And I want to call this Spindle TV, no spaces on a file name, TV Workshop. Alright, and we'll hit save. And you'll notice that the new up here will change to Spindle TV Workshop. So my design has been saved. Now that's the design. Now we need to save the actual toolpaths that we created. And the Save Toolpath icon is over here on the right. In the very bottom row, it's called Save Toolpath. It looks like a red, white, and blue floppy disk for those back in the day that remember those floppy disks. So if we open that up, this is going to be the first time that we've set up a toolpath. So you want to make sure that you open your post processor list, and you want to scroll down to the D's, and you want to find the Digital Wood Carver Inch Tap Post Processor, and you want to set it to that, and the program will default to that from this point on after you save your first toolpath. So Digital Wood Carver Inch Tap. Now, because I have two toolpaths that use the same router bit to carve, I can save them as one file. If each of these toolpaths used a different bit, then I would have to save each file separately. But since they are both the same bit, I can check off up here that says output all visible toolpaths to one file, and then I can make the toolpaths visible by clicking on the two toolpaths here, putting that check mark in, and notice now it lists both of them in the toolpaths to be saved area here. So we'll go ahead now, and our Save Toolpath button is down below here, below the post processor. We will click on Save Toolpath. Notice how it opened us right up to our job folder that we created. So it's a good idea in the beginning to set up your job folder, save your design early, save often, and then anything you save for that design, as you're working, the software will try to keep you organized and bring you right to your folder. So we're already in here, so all we have to do is save our toolpath. Now a toolpath file is what we're going to be running in the controller software, and the file name should provide some information to us while we're at our CNC machine. Now you can name your toolpaths anything that you would like that makes your system easier for you. You know, your organization system, your file names and stuff. I'm going to give you a recommendation, and that recommendation is that a toolpath should have 3 sections to it. Now the first section is going to be a number starting with 0, 01, 02, 03, 04. What order, when I'm at the machine, which file do I run first, second, third, fourth, fifth, so on, because you're going to have projects that have more than one toolpath. And in this case, we have 2 toolpaths, but we're saving them as one file, which is great because they use the same bit. So we really have only one file to run. So it's going to be 01 is going to be the first part of this file name. Now we're going to separate that with an underscore, and then we're going to put in the size of our material. So our material was 12 inches. Actually, I'm sorry, it was 15 inches by 7 1/4 by 0.75 inches thick. So that gives me my material size. And then with no spaces or anything, I'm going to put in my job name. Now if we wanted to, we could separate that with an underscore. We don't have to, but we can go ahead, and my job is Spindle TV Workshop. And now we are going to separate that last part with an underscore, and we're going to put in the router bit information. If you look over to the right, you should be able to see your router bit information, and we're working with a 60-degree V bit. So here we will type in 60 DEG V bit. Now this may seem like a long, complicated name to write out and everything, but let's break it down and let's take a look at what it does for us. If I want to, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, go out and carve the Spindle TV Workshop sign, you know, I know that for this job, that this is the first toolpath that I run, that I need a 15 by 7 1/4 by 3/4 inch board and a 60-degree V-bit in my router. I don't have to come back to my Vectric software when I'm out at the shop or in my, in front of my machine, and I've got my controller program open and I open this file. I don't have to refer back to my Vectric software saying, okay, what size board did I make that for? What bit was it? And things like that. Which one do I run first, second, or third? I kind of have that information now available to me in the file name. And so this is a nice style to adapt to make things easier for you when you're out at the machine carving. But again, it's a recommendation, not a requirement. You can name your toolpaths anything that you want to name them that you understand. You can create your own system. For me, I like to know which file to run first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, what size material that I'm working with, and what bit is associated with this toolpath file that I'm going to be running in the software. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and click Save. And so now we've saved our design. We've saved our toolpaths. We can call it done. We're ready to move over to the controller software, the Planet CNC TNG controller software to create our carving. But if you indulge me for one quick more moment, we're going to go back into the preview toolpath window, this icon here, the first icon on the last row here, and I'm going to turn off the check marks so the toolpath preview, the visible toolpaths go away. And I've got my carving here, and I'm going to kind of turn it a little bit, and I'm going to save that preview image. And that preview image, I'm going to save it as a JPEG, and this is going to be my Spindle TV Workshop proof image. And what this does is this creates a file, a preview of this that I could, if I was working for a customer or something, making something for them, I could actually send them the JPEG file and say, hey, here's your sign. Would you like to make any changes? Please proof it over. Let me know before I carve it. Or also, it's for me when I'm, at the shop. You're going to end up having lots of projects and things like that, and it's nice to be able to pull up a preview of that in the job file. So let's go ahead and take a look at the job folder if we open up our File Explorer, we're going to come into Documents. We're going to find our CNC Jobs folder and find our job folder here. And we've got our toolpath, that TAP file, that TAP file. We've got our design file, our Vectric design file, which is a .crv. Now, if you have Vectric Aspire, you're going to have a .crv 3D file format. But Desktop and Pro, you'll have a .crv. And then we have our JPEG file. So all of our files are nice and organized for this job inside of our job folder, and in the CNC jobs folder where all of my jobs will go. I'll create new folders for each of the jobs, and they will be listed under there and keep it nice and organized and things. So the preview image is wonderful to be able to just double click on it and open it up in a Photos program, the Photos program that comes with the software, and just to generate and create that preview, just to kind of as a reminder of what it looks like. So it's a, nice little preview image, and it's also a file that I can send to a customer for them to review before I carve it, type thing. All right, so that is going to end this tutorial for creating your first V-carve sign. The sign is now ready to move over into the Planet CNC TNG controller program, which we will continue in the next video.